I never imagined that the boy I once carried on my shoulders would someday stand in front of me and tell me I didn't belong in my own house. That morning, when he said the words, my ears refused to believe them. Because this wasn't just any house. This was the house I built with my own hands, and the boy standing there was the nephew I raised like my own son. My name is Robert Miller. I'm 67 years old. And before you judge either of us, let me take you back to where it all began. But before that, if stories about family, sacrifice, and betrayal speak to you, please subscribe to this channel. And while you're here, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, city, state, or country. If you've ever sacrificed for family and been hurt in return, your story matters here. Now, let me tell you about Ethan. Ethan was 6 years old the day my sister died. I still remember the knock on the door. The police officer wouldn't meet my eyes. And the moment I saw Ethan standing behind him, holding a stuffed dinosaur with one missing eye, I knew my life had just changed forever. My sister, Laura, had been a single mother. Ethan's father disappeared before he could even spell his own name. And Laura, she did her best. God knows she tried. But life wasn't kind to her. When she passed, there was no debate about what would happen next. No family meeting. No arguments. I took Ethan home with me that very night. At the time, I was 39. Unmarried. Working construction. Living in a modest 2-bedroom house I had just finished paying off. I told myself it would be temporary. Just until things settled. Temporary turned into forever. The first year was the hardest. Nightmares. Bedwetting. Questions I didn't know how to answer. Why didn't Mommy wake up? Did I do something bad? Are you leaving too? Every time he asked that last question, my heart cracked a little more. So I stayed. I learned how to pack lunches. How to braid messy hair before school. How to sit through parent-teacher meetings where everyone assumed I was his father. At first, I corrected them. I'm his uncle. After a while, I stopped. Because in every way that mattered, I was his father. I worked overtime shifts so he could have decent clothes. I skipped vacations so I could save for his future. I taught him how to ride a bike in the same driveway where he would later tell me I didn't belong. When he turned 13, he started calling me Dad by accident. He'd blush and apologize. I never corrected him. By the time he was 16, it wasn't an accident anymore. People used to tell me I was a good man. That Ethan was lucky. I believed them. When he got into college, I sold my old truck to help pay tuition. When he wanted to study business instead of engineering, I told him to follow his heart. I trusted him. That was my first mistake. College changed him. Not overnight. Slowly. New friends. New ideas. New ambitions. He still came home for holidays, but his hugs felt shorter. His phone stayed in his hand. And when I talked, he listened, but he didn't hear. After graduation, he moved back home. Just for a while. That while lasted years. He said he was saving money. Starting plans. Building a future. I was proud of him. I let him take over small things, paying bills online, handling paperwork, helping with finances. After all, he was young. Smart. Educated. And I was getting older. Then one day, he brought up the house. You should put it in my name someday, he said casually. Just makes sense. I'll take care of you. I laughed it off. Someday, I said. Let's not rush life. His smile didn't reach his eyes. That was the second mistake. A few months later, he suggested renovations. Said it would increase the property value. I agreed. After all, it was still my house. Or so I thought. What I didn't know, what I couldn't imagine, was that while I was trusting him like a son, he was learning how to see me as an obstacle. The morning everything changed started like any other. Coffee on the table. Morning light through the window. Silence that felt heavier than usual. Ethan sat across from me, tapping his fingers. "We need to talk," he said. Those words have never meant anything good in my life. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were papers I didn't recognize. Legal words. Cold words. And then he said it. "This house, it's not really yours anymore." I laughed. Then I looked at his face. And I realized he wasn't joking. I stared at the papers for a long moment, waiting for the words to rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. "This says beneficiary," I murmured. "Power of attorney?" Ethan leaned back in his chair like we were discussing a cable bill. "I've been handling things for a while now," he said. "You signed some of these last year. Remember? When you were sick." I remembered being sick. I remembered trusting him. What I didn't remember was signing my life away. "I signed documents so you could pay bills," I said slowly. "Not so you could take my house." He sighed, the way young people sigh when they think old people just don't understand. "Uncle Rob, you're getting emotional. This is just paperwork. Technically, the house is still yours, but legally I control it." Control it. That word echoed in my head. "So what exactly are you saying?" I asked. He tapped the folder. "I'm saying it might be time for you to think about moving somewhere smaller. Assisted living, maybe. Somewhere comfortable." Assisted living. In the house I built with my own hands, he wanted to assist me right out the door. "You're kicking me out?" I whispered. He didn't answer immediately. "That's a harsh way to put it," he said finally. "I'm just doing what's best. For both of us." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Images flooded my mind: Ethan at 6, asleep on my couch. Ethan at 10, waiting by the window for me to come home from work. Ethan at 16, crying when his first girlfriend broke his heart. And now this man, sitting across from me, was talking about me like an expired appliance. "You wouldn't even have this house if it weren't for me," I said. He shrugged. "That's in the past." The past. That was the day I learned how cheap the past becomes when someone smells ownership. I stood up, my knees shaking. "This conversation isn't over," I said. "You don't get to decide my life." He smiled politely. "We'll see." That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my bedroom, the same room where I had stayed up countless nights listening for Ethan's footsteps when he was a kid, and stared at the ceiling. How had it come to this? I replayed every memory, searching for the moment I lost him. Was it college? Was it the money? Or was it the simple truth that blood mattered more than love? The next morning, things got worse. A letter arrived. Official. Stamped. Cold. It stated that renovations would begin soon, and that I should vacate the premises temporarily. For safety reasons. Temporary. That word again. When I confronted Ethan, he didn't deny it. "I already hired a contractor," he said. "It's my responsibility now." "Your responsibility?" I snapped. "This is my house." He lowered his voice. "Not if you read the fine print." I felt something break inside me. For days, the house felt different. Not like home. Walls I had painted. Floors I had fixed. Every nail carried a memory. And suddenly, I felt like a guest. Ethan stopped asking my opinion. He stopped eating meals with me. He started locking his door at night. One afternoon, I overheard him on the phone. "Yeah," he said. "He's stubborn, but legally he can't do much. Worst case, I'll get an eviction notice." Eviction. From my own house. I stepped outside before he could see me cry. That evening, I drove to the cemetery. I sat beside my sister's grave and spoke out loud. "I promised you I'd take care of him," I said. "I didn't promise I'd let him destroy me." For the first time in years, I questioned whether love without boundaries was a mistake. The next week, Ethan brought home his girlfriend. Her name was Madison. She was polite, too polite. She looked at the house like an investment, not a home. "Once the renovations are done, this place could triple in value," she said, smiling. I realized then, this wasn't just Ethan. This was influence. Greed dressed as ambition. That night, Madison stayed over. The next morning, I found my tools moved. My papers rearranged. My space shrinking. Ethan stood in the kitchen. "We need to set some rules," he said. "Rules. In my house. I'll be staying with Madison for a few days," he continued. "But when I come back, I expect things to be smoother." I looked at him. "Is that a threat?" He didn't answer. Instead, he handed me another document. A notice. 30 days. That's how much time I had left in the house I'd built. I sat down heavily. "You planned this," I said quietly. He hesitated, just for a second. "That doesn't matter anymore." But it mattered to me. Because that hesitation told me something important. He wasn't as untouchable as he thought. That night, I pulled out an old box from the closet. Inside were documents I hadn't looked at in years. Receipts. Deeds. A will. And something else. Something Ethan didn't know existed. As I held it in my hands, I realized something he had forgotten. I may be old. But I wasn't powerless. And the story he thought was over was only beginning. I sat at the edge of my bed with that old box in my lap, the cardboard soft from years of being ignored. Ethan had always been good at looking forward. Dreams. Growth. Expansion. I had survived by remembering. Inside the box were things most people throw away: copies, receipts, handwritten notes. Proof of a life built slowly, honestly. I spread everything out across the bed. The original deed to the house. Mortgage payoff papers. Insurance policies. And then there was the envelope. Yellowed. Unopened. I remembered why I had sealed it away. Years ago, after my first heart scare, a coworker had warned me. "Never assume gratitude lasts forever," he'd said. "Especially when property's involved." Back then I'd laughed. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter from an attorney I'd consulted quietly, just in case. And behind it, a notarized document Ethan had never seen. A conditional trust. I hadn't used it. I hadn't activated it. Because I never believed I'd need to. Until now. The trust stated that if I were ever deemed incapable or pressured into surrendering my home, ownership would be frozen. Pending a full legal review of intent. In simple terms, Ethan's control wasn't as complete as he thought. But there was a problem. To activate it, I'd need proof that I'd been manipulated. And proof wasn't something you could pull out of a box. The next morning, I acted like nothing had changed. I made coffee. Watered the plants. Sat at the table. Ethan avoided my eyes. "Contractors coming by later," he said. "Just a heads up." I nodded. Let him think I was defeated. That afternoon, I drove to the attorney's office. His name was Daniel Price. Same man I'd met years ago. He listened without interrupting, his fingers steepled under his chin. "This happens more often than people think," he said finally. "Especially when family's involved." "So I still have a chance?" I asked. He leaned forward. "You have leverage. But only if we move carefully." He explained it plainly. Power of attorney could be challenged if obtained under confusion, illness, or emotional pressure. Renovation contracts didn't override ownership. An eviction, that was a bluff. "But," he added, "you'll need evidence." I swallowed. "How do you prove betrayal?" "Patterns," he said. "Words. Actions. Documents. Witnesses. Witnesses." I knew exactly where to start. That evening, I visited Mrs. Henderson, my next-door neighbor of 20 years. She'd watched Ethan grow up. Watched me raise him. When I told her what was happening, her face hardened. "That boy's been bragging," she said. About how the house will be his soon. Bragging. She agreed to write a statement. So did my coworker from the construction company, the one who'd heard Ethan joking about retiring his uncle early. Slowly, painfully, the picture formed. At home, Ethan grew bolder. He started bringing people over, contractors, friends, even a realtor once. A realtor. In my living room. Just assessing future potential, Ethan said when he saw my face. I smiled. Inside, I was burning. One night, I overheard him arguing with Madison. You promise, she said. You said he'd be out by now. I'm handling it, Ethan snapped. He's old, not stupid. That was the moment my heart finally went cold. Not broken. Cold. Because love can survive anger. But contempt? That changes things. The next day, I received a text. From Ethan. We need to talk about your moving timeline. I forwarded it to Daniel. His reply came fast. Good. Save everything. That weekend, Ethan invited me to sit down. He spoke slowly. Carefully. Like a man rehearsing. I've arranged a place for you, he said. Affordable. Close by. A nursing home? I asked. Independent living, he corrected. You'll be happier. Happier. I looked at him and realized something terrifying. He believed this. In his mind, he wasn't the villain. He was the hero, freeing himself from a burden. I need time, I said quietly. He nodded, relief flickering across his face. 30 days, he said. That's fair. Fair. That night, I slept like a man preparing for war. Over the next 2 weeks, I became invisible. I packed nothing. I argued nothing. I observed. I recorded conversations on my phone. I photographed documents left carelessly on the counter. I saved emails. And then, Ethan made his mistake. He forged my signature on a renovation approval. A small thing. A careless thing. But illegal. When Daniel saw it, he smiled for the first time. This, he said, tapping the page, changes everything. We filed an injunction. Ownership frozen. Renovations halted. Eviction void. The court date was set. When Ethan was served the papers, his face went pale. You did this? He demanded. I looked him in the eye. You taught me to plan ahead, I said. Guess I learned. Madison left that night. Packed her bags. Didn't look back. Without her voice feeding his confidence, Ethan shrank. Anger replaced arrogance. You're ruining my future, he shouted. No, I said calmly. You did that yourself. The day of the hearing, I sat across from him in the courtroom. For the first time, he looked small. The judge listened carefully. The documents. The recordings. The pattern. And then she spoke words I will never forget. This court finds evidence of undue influence. Undue influence. Ethan's power of attorney was suspended. Temporary, but devastating. Outside the courtroom, he tried to speak. I held up my hand. I didn't raise you to steal, I said. I raised you to be better than me. He didn't answer. That night I returned home. My home. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Because winning doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes, it just feels like survival. And as I sat alone at the kitchen table, I realized something else. The legal battle wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of the hardest decision I would ever have to make. Because the law could protect my house. But it couldn't tell me what to do with the boy I once called my son. For the first time in weeks, I woke up without fear pressing on my chest. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt hostile. Still, something was missing. Ethan hadn't come home the night after the hearing. Or the night after that. His room stayed dark. His door closed. A part of me was relieved. Another part felt like I was grieving someone who was still alive. 3 days later, Daniel called. He's filed a response, he said. Aggressive. Claims you're mentally declining. I closed my eyes. Of course he did. It's standard, Daniel continued. But we should prepare. Prepare. I had spent my life preparing Ethan for the world. Now I was preparing to defend myself from him. The following week, the house filled with strangers again. This time, they weren't contractors. They were evaluators. A cognitive assessment. A medical review. A social worker. All requested by Ethan's legal team. They sat in my living room, clipboards in hand, asking me questions. What day was it? Who was the president? Could I remember a list of words? I answered calmly. But inside, something burned. Because this wasn't concern. This was strategy. After they left, I sat alone and stared at the family photos on the wall. Birthdays. Graduations. Smiles that now felt staged. I wondered how many of those moments Ethan had already rewritten in his mind. 2 days later, I received a call from Ethan. The first one since the hearing. Uncle Rob, he said, his voice softer than I remembered. Can we talk? I almost laughed. Now he wanted to talk. We agreed to meet at a diner halfway between the house and his workplace. Neutral ground. He arrived late. He looked tired. Not defeated, just worn down. This didn't have to get ugly, he said, stirring his coffee. I studied his face. You made it ugly when you decided I was in your way. He flinched. I was under pressure, he said. You don't understand. Help me understand, I replied. He exhaled slowly. Madison wanted stability. A future. She said I was wasting my life waiting for you to die. The words landed like ice water. I didn't agree with her. He added quickly. Not at first. But you didn't stop her. I said. Silence. That house, he continued, it represents everything I sacrificed too. I leaned forward. You sacrificed nothing compared to what I gave you. His jaw tightened. You always remind me of that. He snapped. Like I owe you forever. I felt something inside me shift. I never asked for repayment, I said quietly. I asked for respect. The waitress refilled our cups. The moment passed. I can drop the evaluation, Ethan said finally. If you agree to put the house in a trust. My trust. I stared at him. Even now, still bargaining. No, I said simply. His eyes hardened. Then this goes on, he warned. Then it goes on, I agreed. When I returned home, I found the lock to the garage changed. I laughed out loud. Changed the next morning. That night, I sat in the dark living room and faced the truth I'd been avoiding. This wasn't just about property. It was about control. Identity. Entitlement. Ethan didn't want the house. He wanted validation. The next court date came quickly. This time, Ethan's attorney argued incompetence. Daniel stood calmly and presented medical records, witness statements, and recordings. Then he asked me to speak. I rose slowly. My nephew believes I am weak, I said. Because I am old. I looked directly at Ethan. But weakness is not the same as kindness. The judge listened. Carefully. At the end, she denied Ethan's motion. No guardianship. No forced relocation. Outside the courtroom, Ethan exploded. You're doing this to punish me, he shouted. I met his gaze. I'm doing this to survive. That night, something unexpected happened. Ethan showed up at the house. Unannounced. He stood in the doorway, hands shaking. I don't know who I am without this, he said. Without this. Not without me. That hurt more than anything he'd done. I let him in. We sat across from each other at the same table where he'd slid those papers to me weeks earlier. I loved you, he said suddenly. I nodded. I know. But love isn't enough, he continued. I need more. I took a deep breath. And that, I said, is where we failed each other. He left before dawn. No goodbye. No apology. Just the echo of footsteps moving away from everything we once were. Days passed. Then weeks. The legal process wound down. Ownership restored. Power of attorney revoked permanently. The house was mine again. But the victory tasted bitter. One evening Daniel called. "There's one more thing you should consider," he said. "Your estate planning." I knew what he meant. The will. The future. Who would inherit what remained of my life? That night I sat at my desk with a pen in my hand. Ethan's name stared back at me from the page. I realized something terrifying. The hardest part wasn't deciding what to do with the house. It was deciding what to do with my heart. Because the final decision I made that night would define not just how this story ended, but what it meant. I sat at my desk long after the house had gone quiet, the pen resting between my fingers like it weighed 100 pounds. Ethan's name was still there. Ink faded from years ago, written by a man who believed love alone could guide the future. I thought about erasing it. I thought about rewriting everything. But instead I closed the folder. Because some decisions shouldn't be rushed, especially the ones that come from pain. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went back to work. Not because I needed the money, but because I needed to feel useful again. The construction site smelled like sawdust and oil. Familiar. Honest. The men asked questions, of course. I didn't give details. "Family stuff," I said. They nodded. Everyone understands those two words. Weeks passed. Ethan didn't call. Didn't text. Didn't show up. At first, I checked my phone more than I'd like to admit. Then, I stopped. One afternoon, a letter arrived. No lawyer letterhead. No threats. Just an envelope with my name written in a hand I recognized instantly. Inside was a single page. "Uncle Rob. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve it. I lost Madison. I lost my job. Turns out people don't trust someone who tries to take his uncle's house. I'm not writing to ask for anything. I just wanted you to know I was wrong." I read it 3 times. There was no apology for the pain. No acknowledgement of betrayal. Just regret. And regret is a complicated thing. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I called Daniel. "I want to update the will," I said. He didn't sound surprised. We met the following week. He laid out the options: trusts, charities, contingencies. "What do you want your legacy to be?" he asked. Legacy. I thought about the house. The walls. The memories. And then I thought about Ethan at 6 years old, asleep on my couch with that one-eyed dinosaur. "I want accountability," I said finally. Daniel raised an eyebrow. So I told him. The new will didn't erase Ethan. But it didn't reward him either. The house would go into a trust, not to Ethan, not to me, but to fund education for children who lost parents young. Children like him. Ethan would receive what remained, only after 10 years. 10 years of staying out of trouble. 10 years of work. 10 years of proving character mattered more than entitlement. Daniel nodded slowly. "That's fair," he said. I signed. And for the first time in a long while, my hand didn't shake. Months later, Ethan showed up at the house again. This time, he knocked. I opened the door. He looked thinner. Older. "I heard," he said quietly. I stepped aside and let him in. We sat in the living room. The same room where everything had fallen apart. "You didn't cut me off completely," he said. "No," I replied. "I didn't." "Why?" he asked. I met his eyes. "Because I didn't raise you to be discarded," I said. "But I also didn't raise you to believe love comes without consequences." He swallowed. I don't deserve that, he said. You deserve the chance to earn it, I answered. We talked for hours. Not about the house. Not about the money. About his fear. My mistakes. The silence between us that had grown into something toxic. When he left, there were no promises. Just understanding. That was enough. Today, the house is quiet again. But it feels like home. I wake up early. Drink my coffee slowly. Watch the sun hit the same walls I once feared losing. People ask me if I regret raising Ethan. I tell them no. Because love, even when it breaks you, teaches you who you are. But I also tell them this. Never confuse kindness with weakness. Never give without boundaries. And never assume blood guarantees loyalty. Family isn't who stays when things are easy. It's who respects you when they think you have nothing left to give. If you're watching this and you've ever sacrificed for someone who forgot what you gave them, know this. You are not foolish. You are not weak. And it is never too late to stand up for yourself. Thank you for listening to my story.